This is Scott with Clasis. What we'll be taking a look at today with this video is how you can set up and configure your Enterprise App Forms Administration panel so that you can provide different forms, like different departments, different users, things of that nature. If you had gone through our prior video on the enterprise setup and configuration of the product itself, you'll know that we left off right at the end at this page, which is the Manage Tenant page. And Manage Tenant really simply means you can create or define different tenants, and that could be different departments, different websites, whatever works best in your environment. So by default, what you get is what's called the default tenant. And you can see what I've done here is I've added a logo that's simply for the Clasis name. Now I've also gone ahead and I cleared this at one point and I said create a new tenant. So I'll come up here and let me just do a new one here called HR. And I can pick a logo for this. And now if I save that, and let me refresh this page, you'll see over here along the right, I now have three different tenants. My default, which I had set up initially, finance, what I had set up initially with a different logo, and then finally the HR tenant, which we just created. So again, this could be for different companies that you might manage, or different departments, or even different users, however you want to go about setting this up. And what that allows you to do is define a completely different set of forms for each of those different tenants. Okay, so now that we have our tenants set up, let's go ahead and go to the designer. And I'll click that, and you'll see up here in the URL, this is pointing to the designer page and then for the default tenant. So if I wanted to get to, let's say, the new HR tenant designer, I would simply change the URL, put in HR, refresh this page, and now what I have is the Enterprise App Forms Designer for my HR tenant. And you can see it's completely fresh. I have no forms, no folders, nothing here. So this allows you, again, to create an individual set of forms for each of your different tenants that you might need in your organization. All right, so let's go back to the default, because here I've gone ahead and pre-configured some forms so that we can get through this demo for you without wasting a lot of time with you guys watching me create forms. And let me just show you what I've done here on this default tenant. I have a form called FRM default. Let me just open that up in edit mode to show you what that looks like. Simply has two buttons on it, and then each of those buttons will simply open up the other two forms that I have. So let's go ahead and close that, and you'll see that I have here in my tenant, I have the form customers and form employees to match those different buttons. So once you have all of your forms created that you need, now the next thing you need to do is set up a default or a startup form so that when you provide a URL for your users to go to, it launches the form that you want them to see initially. So let me show you how to do that. From this designer page, you'll see along the left-hand side, there's an option here called Navigation Settings. So if I select that, by default, this will be unchecked, but I've already checked it here for our default tenant. But what you can do is come down here and say Manage Startup Forms. And now once you have that selected, you're going to select your default site or your default tenant, select the form that you want set by default, in other words, the startup form you want your users to see when they first hit your URL, and then save those changes. So now if I were to open up a new tab up here, and put in my default URL, you will see that this opens up to our default tenant, appsite/default. And now my default form appeared, and I can navigate around, click on customers. This loads my customers form. I can return back, which again, just a rule and a button to get me back to this form. Go back to employees. That'll take me to an employee form, and I can go back. So that's how you allow your users to navigate around your forms. Or should I say, it's one way to allow your users to navigate around your forms. You give them a startup form, you give them basically menu options, which are meant to be buttons, and they can navigate through the different forms that you want them to see. Now the other option that you can do is what's called left navigation. So this is the same as if you think about SharePoint along the left-hand side, the quick launch area. This is the same basic principle around that. And you'll see in this drop-down, there is this Manage Left Navigation section. So you can select that. Again, select the tenant that you want, and then you go through and pick the forms that you want to appear along the left-hand side. So let me go ahead and just select all three of these. Once again, I will click Save on these. Now, there is one other thing that we have to do, though, before the left navigation functionality appears on your web page. We need to go back to actually IIS Manager. So let me bring that up here. And you'll want to go through, expand your sites, expand your App Forms website that you created during the setup, and select the app site entry here. And then in the middle, you'll see this application settings. Let's launch that. And this enable navigation option, that you want to set to true. I want you to click OK to that. Now, if we go back to our web page here, and let me refresh this, you will see that now what we have is the ability to do this left navigation option along the left-hand side of the page. And it also displays the logo that you chose. But see here, I can go to my FRM default. I can directly go to customers if I want to, or employees. So this is yet another way of allowing your users to navigate around the different forms that you want them to see. If you want to have strict control over your forms and allow them to only go in a specific order, say, to get to where they need to be, you may not want to do the left navigation. Use the buttons, and that way they're kind of constrained in what they can get to. But if you want to let your users pick and choose what forms they need and what they have to fill out, which if it's not like a wizard system where A must be done before B, say, feel free to use the left navigation, and now you can let them pick and choose what forms that they want. So let's go back here to the designer, and let's take a look at making a change here to a different tenant so you can see how that works. So let's go up here to the URL. We'll change default, and let's go to finance. And refresh that page now, and this will again bring up the designer for our finance tenant. And once again, you'll see there's nothing here, so we'll create a new folder. Finance. And this can be, of course, any name that you want. I'm just putting something that makes sense for me at the moment. We'll create a new form. I'm going to make this very basic because I just want to show you how you can go through and set all this up from the start. So let me just make a couple of quick changes here. Okay. Just make a couple of basic changes. We'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to put any more controls on here, so we'll save this. And actually, let's go make a change to the form name here so it makes more sense. All right, now let's check that in. And we'll close that form now. Now remember, we're still up here, we're still in our finance tenants. Now we'll go to navigation settings here for finance. We'll enable that navigation. And we'll just do startup forms on this one. So there's finance, there's our default form we just created. Let's save that change. And now, let's copy this part of the URL. And these will be, of course, the URLs that you provide to your users to give them a starting point. That finance, let's refresh that. And there is our finance option. So you can, if you want to be able to see your logo, you can enable the left navigation, but if you don't select any forms for that left navigation, then of course nothing appears here along the left-hand side. So if we want to just make that quick change so you can see how that works, we'll come back over here to our designer. Let's change this to manage left navigation. Select that, select our default form at the moment, save those changes, and you'll see this takes effect right away. So if I refresh this page, we now have our form right there along the left-hand side. So it really is that easy to set up and configure your administrative panel for startup forms, for logos that you might want to see to represent the different tenants, Manage left navigation. Do you want your users to be able to navigate between all your forms along the left-hand side, or would you rather guide them where they need to be by using buttons from each of your forms? So it's pretty simplistic to do. Once you have that configured, it really is simply going to the next step of designing your forms. And if you've done any of our other form design videos that we have up on our website for SharePoint even, the designer is identical. You simply create a new form, you can organize them by folders, add the controls that you want, and then simply check in that form once you're done. And then you just need to give your users a way to get to that form. Again, whether it be through buttons on the startup form or through the manage left navigation. I hope you found this video to be beneficial. We are going to be creating more of these types of videos in the coming weeks and months, so be sure to check our website often for new demos. You can find all of our videos at http://www.clasis.com/pages/viewdemo.aspx. If there's a video that you would like to see that is currently not on our site, please do let us know by sending an email to info@clasis.com, and we will do our best to get that video created for you. Again, I hope you found this video to be of benefit, and thank you for using Clasis App Forms.